Around this time of year, it has become sort of a tradition to begin hearing things about the so-called war on Christmas. But no one ever talks about the real holiday war, the war on Thanksgiving. Poor Thanksgiving, stuck between the boisterous Halloween with all of its costumes and candy, and Christmas with all of the magical lights and presents and music and movies. And in between is Thanksgiving, the middle child of the holidays, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. And there's a lot of controversy around Thanksgiving too. And it's not all recent controversy. In fact, the Washington Post says that Thanksgiving was the most politicized holiday of the 19th century. See, what used to happen, because it was not yet an official national holiday, and so at the time of the Civil War and slavery, preachers would often use Thanksgiving as an excuse to preach on abolition and against slavery. And so you had many people in the South who just refused to even go to church that day. And you had other feelings and prejudices mixed into it too. For instance, right here in Texas, you had the governor Orrin Milo Roberts, who from 1879 to 1883 would not have any Thanksgiving in his state, claiming that it was, quote, a damned Yankee institution. And here we are in 2020. And we have other controversies around it. Some of them I'm awfully glad we are having those controversies and talking about them. We are in the midst of a cultural shift about Thanksgiving right now, as the traditions that we grew up with, and I mean, heck, even my kids, they were still doing this. Those school traditions where the kids would dress up in paper bags and construction paper with pilgrim hats and Indian headdresses. We're now in this shift where we're saying, wait, there's some big problems with this right here. First of all, the cultural appropriation, but also the really big fact that this is denying the genocide of the native peoples who were on this land. And the thing is, those stories that we were all taught about Miles Standish and the Great Feast and all of that, that wasn't even part of the Thanksgiving story until 1900. But Thanksgiving, I am here today to promote you and celebrate you, because it turns out that there is another version of Thanksgiving that is actually historically accurate and led by a Unitarian, one that we can get behind. I call it Sarah's Thanksgiving. Sarah Hale was a Unitarian. She was born in 1788 to parents who believed in the education of all children, including girls. So they taught her at home. And she had an older brother, Horatio, who also believed in this. And so when he went off to college at Dartmouth, he would come home and he would teach her everything that he himself was learning. She became a school teacher and a wife and a mother. And then at age 34, with 5 children, she became a widow. So she took to writing to support her family. By the way, you are familiar with one of her works, Mary Had a Little Lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. Yes, she wrote that, among other things. And she became an editor, rising to become the editor-in-chief of the largest women's magazine of that day, Godey's Ladies Book. She also was an ardent abolitionist. She advocated for public health. She was a big promoter of American writers. At that time, the attention was still on European writers, and it was through her work, especially as an editor, that she was able to lift up so many of those voices, those writers. And she had what we would call a burning coal, an issue that to her was so important that it would sustain what turned out to be 15 years of fighting for it to come true. And her burning coal was to have a National Day of Thanksgiving. She wrote editorials about it year after year in her magazine, and she would talk about what this would mean for the United States, that it would be something that would resemble both the Christian feast of Pentecost, but also the Jewish days of Thanksgiving. She was aware of all of the religions and all of the cultures that were coming into the United States, and she celebrated them. She thought that was a wonderful thing, and she said, wouldn't it be great, in addition to all of the separate religious holidays that we have, if we had a national day where we could all come together and celebrate all that we have been given? So for 15 years, she was writing editorials and every year writing to whoever was the president of the United States. She wrote to President Zachary Taylor. No response. She wrote to President Millard Fillmore. No response. She wrote to President Franklin Pierce. No response. She wrote to President James Buchanan. No response. And still, she persisted. Finally, at age 74, on September 28, 1863, she wrote to President Abraham Lincoln in the midst of the Civil War, pointing out that the nation that was in so much pain needed to have one thing that they could sort of all come together around. And just a couple of weeks later, President Lincoln issued a proclamation that read in part, I do, therefore, invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea and those who are sojourning in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving, and fervently implore the interposition of the Almighty hand to heal the wounds of the nation and to restore it as soon as may be consistent with the divine purposes to the full enjoyment of peace, harmony, tranquility, and our union. Sarah Hale got to see it come true in her own lifetime. Now, it did not become a congressionally mandated federal holiday for quite a long time afterwards, not until 1941. But that is often the way of these things that we adopt as our burning coals. We have to do as much as we can and have some faith that some of the work may be completed after we are gone. This is going to be a very different Thanksgiving. All the holidays for the rest of this year are going to be very different. Many of us will not have the same people at our table that we are accustomed to being there. People are not traveling. People are staying in their own household, even like my family if they live in the same town, just to be a little bit safer, so that at next year's Thanksgiving table, please, everyone will be there. And our country is in a difficult place, highly divided, although again, remembering the Civil War, I don't know that we can say this is the most we've ever been divided. And the thing is, there have been other difficult holidays before. There have been holidays of people perhaps sitting around the same table, but with conversation very stilted. Okay, maybe that was just last Thanksgiving for you. But when you think of all of the Thanksgivings that have come before, and the times when there were people temporarily missing from the table, during Vietnam, during all the wars, during times when people in the U.S. were so divided that to bring together different generations just wouldn't work. We have had divided Thanksgivings before. One of the things about the work that we do now is we can never imagine the effect that it might have in the future, and how what we say today may speak to people 50 years from now or more. In one of her first editorials promoting the idea of a national Thanksgiving, back in 1847, Sarah Hale wrote these words, and maybe they resonate today. She wrote, "Would that the next Thanksgiving might be observed in all the states on the same day. Then, though the members of the same family might be too far separated to meet around one festive board, they would have the gratification of knowing that all were enjoying the blessings of the days." There is a human need, and I think it's a very good one, to show appreciation, to show gratitude for what we have been given. And you see this across the different religions and across different cultures. It is good to set aside a day where we give attention to that need, and where we pause just for a moment, even amongst really difficult times, to say, yes, but there are also good things here. And then to articulate what those good things are. You know, that thing that we do of going around the Thanksgiving table and everyone saying what you're grateful for. There's a reason why that tradition has persisted. We have in our history been separated at Thanksgiving because of wars, because of disease, because of other circumstances. Those people made it through, and we are here today, and we will make it through. May we have the gratification of knowing that our loved ones are also celebrating the blessings of Thanksgiving.